I feel like this would be best described as a rom-com horror. And I was today years old when I figured out who Mason Gooding's father was. Sorry, that was a little bit of a distraction, but it's just like, it's still on my brain. I was watching Fish Jelly reviews and they were talking about, who his father is. And I was like, who's his father? I mean, I've seen him. Didn't he play in Scream? Wasn't he one of the characters in like Scream 5 and 6 or 6 and 6, whatever, the last 2 Screams? And so I looked him up. He's Cuba Gooding's. Like, really? I had no freaking idea. That is a tangent. Let me get on to this review for Hard Eyes. I was looking forward to Hard Eyes. It's a slasher. I knew a little bit of what it was about, but I avoided watching trailers. So all I knew was the basic premise. I did not realize how comedic it was going to be. It wasn't the same type of comedy as let's say, Companion, but there were comedic undertones, and it didn't even really feel like a black comedy, but there were comedic undertones in different things that happened. And Fish Jelly reviews refer to this as a rom-com horror, and that is the perfect label because that's what this is. It's this rom-com wrapped up in a horror movie. Or a horror movie wrapped up in a rom-com, whatever. I'm not a fan of rom-coms, but I am a fan of horror, so it was interesting how this was done. The premise of the story is there's this serial killer who for the past 2 years before the events of this movie has been going around killing couples, and this killer is known as the Heart Eyes Killer, and they have given him an initial nickname, kind of like BTK. It's HEK. He's the HEK killer. And oops. So it's starting up again. The opening scene is a fresh batch of kills for the current year. And then we pick up with the character. Oh my gosh, I have forgotten her name already. And I've forgotten the other. Hold on a minute. My dog wants to get up in my lap. Okay, that distraction by my dog gave me the time to just go ahead and look up the character's name. Olivia Holt plays the character of Allie, and Mason Gooding plays Jay. And so you see this chance meeting between them at like a coffee shop. And then later they meet each other again. And it's basically Allie is in trouble with her job because of the marketing campaign that she has set forth for this jewelry company, which is like till death do us part. But the ad is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it was comedic. Like by the time you see this ad playing, you're like, wait a second, this feels like a comedy too. Then of course the hunk walks in, and there they see each other again. And so the rest of the day, pretty much the entirety of that movie after the initial kill is taken up in this one day. And they end up becoming caught up in the killing exploits of the HEK. And there were quite a few things that I did like about this movie. I had some issues. There was one major issue I had that I cannot get out of my brain that really, really bugs me. And that's kind of pulling it back a little bit from me giving it like a 0.5-star higher rating. I'm probably going to rate this about a 3 or a 3.25 out of 5. But one of the things that I liked was that there were moments that it subverted my expectation in an okay way. Like it wasn't anything that annoyed me. I like when movies do that and it makes sense. I did have things that I had written down as cons, but they ended up not being cons later because by the time you get to the movie, these questions or issues that I had were pretty much answered, taken care of. So I liked that subversion of expectation. I also liked that it wasn't overly long. It doesn't outstay its welcome. It's only about an hour and 37 minutes, but credits, by the time credits started rolling, it was a little bit less than an hour and a half. So it's a quick watch. It's paced pretty well. Like I said, intro scene starts off with kills. Then we have the introduction of the characters, and then they get caught up in this whole thing with the HEK. Now, I didn't look into who the director was going into this, but when I was listening to Fish Jelly, I found out that his name is Josh Rubin, and he's done some other things that I've seen. One was Werewolves Within, which I enjoyed. I thought it was fine. I have not seen his other movies scare me, but they were also talking about one of the writers of this, which he happened to be the director of Happy Death Day, was not the writer, but director. So I mean, I like Happy Death Day. So it was interesting that there were these different people working on it. And I don't know if I like this more than Werewolves Within. They're two completely different movies because Werewolves Within is like a supernatural thing, or, you know, paranormal. You're talking about werewolves. But I liked these various elements in it, the pacing, the acting. I thought the acting was pretty good. I liked the chemistry between the two leads. The storyline in some places was a little bit goofy, with some of the setups for certain plot lines or scenarios a little bit weak and thin, but these other things about it were so enjoyable that that was really a non-issue for me. Some of the dialogue in here was also pretty funny. Now, I have mentioned the comedy, that it's more comedic than I expected. There's a scene, I got a couple chuckles out of it. Well, probably about 3 or 4. There were a couple moments that I laughed out loud in the theater, you know, well, not very loud, but just a chuckle, you know, because I thought it was funny. And I'll give you an example of one of them was, there's... The character played by Mason Gooding, at one point, he is being accused of something violent, and he's like, someone made a compliment about his muscles because he's built very well. They show a picture of him like from a social media site or something. So he's got this great physique, and someone made mention to him about his physique, his muscles, and he said, these muscles aren't made for violence, they're made for cuddling. I don't know. That just tickled me. I thought it was funny. Maybe it was the delivery, or it could have been it could have been both. The way he delivered his lines, he's got some pretty good comedic timing. There was that sort of stuff that was built in to a lot of different things that happened. There was one scene that I initially was feeling like it was a con, but then when I kind of, you know, grabbed my brain for a moment, and I was like, wait a second, you're forgetting what kind of movie this is. There's a scene where these two characters, they're being pursued by the killer, and there's a moment where they stop and they're about to kiss. And I'm like, why are you doing that? But then the moment right after that ends up being kind of part of the comedy of sort of what's going on that whole evening. So that's not really a con anymore. Obviously, if this were a movie that took itself more seriously, I probably would have an issue with that scene. But because this is a comedy interwoven in this whole story, it's okay. I can give it a pass. So there were some minor complaints I had. I'll give you an example. It's very typical for horror stuff, for these sorts of tropey things that happen in horror that just agitate me. I'm so tired. I wish they would not overdo this stuff, but I'll give you an example. Some characters are in a police station. The police station is dark and gloomy. It's like they have this dark filter over the camera. It's hard to even, like, it's just like this fog or something. The interrogation room is dark. The lobby is dark. I mean, you saw things better. There was more light in the scene when characters were outside when it was dark. So I really don't like when they do things like that. I know they're trying to set this atmosphere, but to me, it's just like, number one, it's a little hard to see them, and they're supposed to be inside an area that would be normally well lit. So that kind of like what they do with, you know, hospital scenes in a horror movie. Most of the time, the hallways are dark and there's hardly anybody there, and that's just so not realistic, but whatever. Another one, there's a bunch of killing and fighting and, well, violence going down in this area that's not very big, and no one else in the other rooms heard this, okay? And then another really minor complaint, I'll get to the big one in a minute. There's these characters on this thing together, and the baddie is thrown off, and the person who's trying to escape from the baddie, instead of jumping off in the completely opposite direction, jumps off in the same side where the killer has just been thrown off. Like, why? Why would you even try to land anywhere near it like that? That was just like, okay. All right. So the main issue I have with this, that I can't let this go. So if anybody maybe caught something that I missed, let me know. And the reason that I can't let it go is because it's a huge plot point. There's a moment where the killer ends up in a certain location, and there was no easily explainable way that this killer would have even known that specific location. Now, I could buy the possibility that the killer had tailed individuals to this location. But how did they get in without leaving any sort of indication that they had forcibly gotten in? And how did they know the exact right place to be within this building? There were just too many what ifs. Okay, Chibi. There were too many, like, variables in this thing for me to buy. It's like, wow, that's super convenient. How? Number one, I was like, well, how and why was this particular individual targeted? That's answered. So that's something that's not even a con anymore, because it was on my list. But then I was thinking, well, are they going to explain how this killer knew how to be in this exact right spot? And that was not explained satisfactorily for me. So it's not really enough to inhibit my enjoyment of the film, because it was a decent slasher horror with some rom-com mixed in, but it's enough to me that it doesn't hold up to scrutiny. And even though there are things I can now forgive about it because of the comedic elements to it, I still would like a little bit more solidity when it comes to certain things, and that bothered me. So, whatever. I mean, it's not a humongous deal, but it kind of is. Because, I mean, it's important. That's what sets all this stuff in motion for the whole rest of the story. So, I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Anyway, I don't have much more to say about Hard Eyes, so I will be wrapping this one up. If you guys check it out this weekend, let me know what you think. And let me know if you have that same sort of issue that I did, or if you noticed something that I somehow missed. All right, that's it for this one, you guys. Later.